India, the third largest startup ecosystem on the planet by volume, and the media covering it, very old school.
Yeah, that's the problem. So we built something better.
I'm Mayur, founder and CEO of a growth agency called W3C. So I'll break down the money, the business, and the moves.
Hi, I'm Rishi, the founder and engineer of Quebec. I'll go deep on the tech, the product, and builders what actually they care about. So Mayur, tell us about what just happened with Kabeer Biswas and Karthik Mishra.
Yeah, for sure, Rishi. I guess a lot of people know about what's actually recently going on with the recent startup that they raised around 102 crore in seed. So a lot of people might know Kabeer Biswas and Karthik Mishra from the very public failure that they had with Dunzo, which was around 2 years ago. And right now they are entering with a very new, fresh idea and a fresh technology and business model. And the startup that they are working on is called AM. It's actually a consumer facing AI business, and they recently raised 102 CR with the partnership with Peak XV, Blume Ventures, and CRED. So yeah, they are currently working on outside.
Okay, but the real question, why are top VCs are paying 100 crores for a company with a zero product?
Actually, I think the bet they are taking here is it's called founders bet, and of course they are very well known for their public failure with Dunzo and everything that went on with their financial year losses back in 2023. But I guess it's also like if we take a look at this from an investor lens, then I guess the bet that they are taking on is the core thesis, which means the consumer AI angle. And recently, it's something that like every VC is currently focusing on. So I guess that's why they are taking this premium bet on the founder and actually the whole storytelling and the narrative behind that.
Interesting. But you mentioned that Blume Venture was the Dunzo's investor too, right? So, like they are re-upped despite the losses of 1800 crore in FY23.
Yeah, I think Blume Venture was definitely Dunzo. They also did invest in Dunzo back when they are working on that. So right now, it's actually an old story. And if we take this from a new perspective, then Bloom is currently focusing on this new thesis, which they call it a theory, and that theory is about India 1, India 2, and India 3. So this is the segmentation of Indian consumers by their income and digital maturity, which means we have the top layer, we have the middle layer, and we have the bottom layer. And the whole business model behind AMP is actually focused on the India one, which means the top consumer, probably around 10 to 15 million household who are tech savvy, who are very well known about the tech in general, and they actually care their time better than money. So I guess that's why the Bloom Ventures has recently again participated into this new round, right?
Interesting. That makes sense. Actually, they are focusing on the tier one only, not the traction, right? So,
Exactly.
and what's CRED doing is here in this round?
Yeah, CRED is something when people hear about they while they make an investment, especially in the startup. So I guess so far they have only made one actual bet on startup, which is still in the pre-product, or let's call it pre-seed. So actual users of CRED are falling into that segment one that we recently discussed, which means people who are pretty much aware about how to use credit cards, how they can use various different subscriptions, and also like people who are very well versed with the tech in general. And again, the bottom line is that the total addressable market, which means TAM, is for M. If we talk about for M, then it's the only segment one, which is people who can actually afford that. And if we cover that math, then I guess that's the main reason that CRED might be also participating into this. And on top of that, this is also actually their first major balance sheet bet after liquid loans.
It's filled strategically, right?
Of course, yeah, this is definitely a strategic move. All right, Rishi. So the money is in, right? But what is them actually building? If you, because you have a technical background, then you have also gone deep into this. Yeah. So tell our audience like what AM is actually building.
Okay, so M is developing an like AI powered concierge. right? It's an agentic AI that for consumer. It's not like basic chatbot, but it's like an system that take actions, right? So they are building a full agentic system that will use as your personal concierge.
So concierge, for those of you who don't know about this word, concierge basically means a caretaker, and especially the caretaker who takes care about all of your household chores. That's
Dunzo and the M product.
interesting. So when you say concierge, right? So what does it actually look like for a user if we have to boil it down to very simple basics?
Sure. So the concierge is like your personal caretaker. You said it right. So, but that was the human. But now it will be a like a very easy interface. If take an example, the WhatsApp. I think they are also trying to release the WhatsApp first interface, right? So if you ask anything to that agent, they'll do. Such an example, like if you wanna book the plumber, right? You just have to ask that book a plumber and fix my leakage. So agent will do everything on behalf of you.
Correct. So, if I understand this correctly, the whole concept of building something around concierge and that type of application, that idea is not actually new. There are so many companies, including Magic, operator by ChatGPT, and Go Butler. They all try to do similar stuff, but they all died actually. But so, why do you think why now? Why now is the good time to build something like M?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, right? You know that the how AI evolves in this world, right? And right earlier it was totally handled by the human operation, and right now the use of LLM tools is reliable, right? And we have the cheapest interface and the WhatsApp ubiquity, because that whole Indian markets is very familiar with the WhatsApp.
Correct.
So this is where the economics work. Where earlier that concierge died because of the operational cost, and that's how the maths changed.
So basically, let's say before 10 years, the tech was not built for some to build in order to build something like this. But right now, with the fast adoption of AI and the way the technology is evolving, right now it's a good time to actually build around this, right?
Yeah.
Interesting. So, because Rishi, you are a builder, right? You are a developer yourself, and you are a founder of Quebec. So tell us about from a lens of an builder. So if you were to build something like this, if you were to architect something like this, where do you even start? What's the first step?
Sure. Builders, you can suggest more in the comment, but here's my perspective. Like if I were have to build this kind of system, I would divide in the 5 layer. The first one is the definitely interface, where the WhatsApp comes into the picture, the user can directly interact with that. Then the other part is the reasoning and the planning, right? So just an example, if I ask in the WhatsApp like book my plumber, so what the reasoning part is do, they divide into the subtasks, like they do search, then rate checking for the vendors and all, and then finally the booking, they have done booking with their vendors. So that's the reasoning and planning. The third portion is the tools and integrations. So this is the, I think, challenging part. They have to figure out, because right now we have this service marketplace like a urban company, then quick commerce like a Blinkit, Zepto, Instamart, and everything. But most of them doesn't have the public API to handle this kind of architecture. Then the fourth layer will be the memory and the personalization, right? So the all it will be for the Indian family, so that each Indian family has their own perspective and own personalization, that I prefer Amul than other milk, right? So that is my preference. So the memory comes into the picture, where they have to store in the vector DB or maybe a structural memory, right? And the last, which is the human in the loop layer, and which is again the most important thing for the trust. Why? Because if I am booking something, I have to pay for that, right? So for the confirmation and authentication, the system should ask to the user that do you want to book with them or not. So that is the fifth layer. So basically, if I conclude it, it will be in 5 layer: the interface, then reasoning and planning, then tools and integration, the memory part, and the human in the loop layer.
Okay, so this is the skeleton of if you were to build something like this, then these are the 5 layers that you should be focusing on, right? Very interesting. So let's say out of those 5 layers, which one is the actual mode?
So the actual mode is the tools and integration.
Yeah.
Because like the service marketplace, the quick commerce, then also the society application like MyGet, they have to provide service like a public API. So this kind of system can be integrated with them. So this is the, I guess, biggest challenge for them right now in current situation. And I think the second one is memory, because the memory compounds, and day by day they'll add more preferences, and it's for all the family members, right?
Correct.
So it's switching the cost and growth with usage. So that is the, I guess, biggest challenge for the cost perspective.
Yeah. So talking about the memory, and of course we also talked about the ML models and the importance of having a memory, which means that it needs to understand and remember everything which you prefer, everything which like makes your life easier. And now addressing the elephant in the room, because we talked about the ML. So OpenAI recently launched the operator. So ChatGPT also has different apps now, and Google also has their own Astra. So why doesn't M just get streamrolled? So what's the actual competitive advantage?
Yeah, that's correct. And I think this is the biggest fear for all startup as of now, because the frontier labs are running behind the agentic works, right? But I think M is for like Indian specific integrations, plus the memory part, and the last WhatsApp integration. So that is the, I guess, they're bad. Okay, let's jump back to the business part, right? So, what do you think? Does the business model work for this kind of product? Because जहाँ पे लोग Spotify नहीं खरीद रहे हैं, वहाँ पे 500 से 2000 तक का subscription will they buy?
Yeah, this is very deep question, and if we have to think about it from a psychological perspective, then again, coming back to my point that I mentioned earlier about their target audience. So, which means we talked about the thesis from Blume Ventures, India 1, India 2, and India 3. So, which means that they are only targeting between layer 1 and layer 2, like people who are in the top funnel and who are in the middle funnel. Yeah. So, and again, if we have to boil it down to like very basics, then I will ask myself one question. And the question is that, do I value my time more than money? And the answer is no. Then it's not for you. And if the answer is yes, then M is actually for you, because I don't want to go through the hassle of going to like check 10 different apps and scheduling into my time zone, and then going through multiple hoops just to perform one single task, which is why I would prefer something like this. And again, going back to your concern about the subscription model, so I guess this is something which has been pretty much challenging, at least for the Indian consumers, because if you talk about simple example with Netflix, so people actually want entertainment, right? They want to see some movies, they want to get themselves um, you know have this very tool that they want to use, but they are very sort of like typical when it comes to paying for the subscription. So if it basically depends on what sort of like business model they pursue. If it's if it's about the subscription, or is it the commission angle, then yeah, it totally depends.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think it's a positive for the tier 1 because they value time than the money. Okay, so 102 CR post money with the zero product. What's peak XP's fund return math here?
Yeah. So first thing first, let's talk about Peak XP, right? So Peak XP currently manages around $10 billion in assets under management. They have managed more than like 500 portfolio companies, and they have sort of invested into more than 50 unicorns, plus 36 IPO. So if we talk about all of these numbers, then it is just matter of the thesis that they want to bet on. And again, we talked about the whole thesis of why VCs are investing into consumer AI plays, and play basically means a business, right? So the math is, if we have to break down the numbers, then they raised 102 CR at 300, around something around that valuation. So which means the ratio is almost like 3 to 3.3x. And we are only talking about seed round. So I'm guessing that there will also be a Series A, Series B, because of course, because it's a business, then they have to they have no choice but to think about how to scale and how to scale fast. Of course, there are some strategic steps that they cannot miss, which we talked about, how to address the market, how to penetrate that India one thesis, and how to actually find the very first few thousand users. So I guess this is the bet that they are taking, because they have invested in like a lot of consumer AI facing verticals, and I guess M is probably one of them. So maybe that's why.
Fair. Okay. So, but Reliance wrote off 1645 CR from Dunzo, right?
Correct.
Does that hurt or will help this founder?
Yeah. So Dunzo is something which sets biggest drawback, at least when we talk about the investor lens in here, because of course, if someone is investing into your startup, then for sure their only math behind is that they want the profits, they want the returns, or they want 15x, 10x, or something like that. But it's also the matter of timing, because when Dunzo was operating at the time, they already had many top competitors like Flipkart Minutes, they had Swiggy, they had Blinkit, they have Zepto as well. And again, at that time, the whole business model that they were operating with, and it was very capital heavy, business, because we are talking about the dark stores, we are talking about so many employees, so many workers. So it was basically something that was pretty much like a bit out of their ball game, we can call it. So that's why I guess Reliance had to wrote off the entire check and call it a loss. But again, we are talking about very capital heavy games in here. So yeah, maybe that's the reason.
Yes, sure. Like maybe Dunzo was a market problem or a education problem that determines in the M product.
Correct. The whole thesis, the whole chapter gives us one specific lesson, which means they actually invented that category specific business, which means, I mean, that would be their biggest advantage in this.
They maybe already have experience
Correct.
on that part.
Exactly.
Okay, and also they have 21% of ESOPs pool, right? So is it a confidence signal or like a admission they need X-Fang talent?
So 21% ESOP, which means employee stock ownership planning, is definitely more than what is currently being offered with the Indian startup ecosystem. It's actually 2 to 3 times more, because usually startups and companies who are willing to raise funds in the future, they usually offer somewhere between 8 to 12%. So again, we talked about the thesis that AM itself is a capital heavy business. So that's why they need to think about a lot of things like runaway money. They have to make sure that they hire the very top-notch talent pool, because it's an AI heavy business. So that's why they have to make sure that they actually get the right talent in their team. So I guess the only sort of reasoning that I see is that their goal is to hire, focus on hiring spend and making sure that they deliver on their roadmap and scaling the product itself. So yeah, maybe that's why 21% ESOP makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense. And it will be a war for their talents that they.
So Rishi, we talked about business and the fundraising part, and we still have to cover up some more exciting angles. So let's say if I have to ask you this, like 6 months from now, considering everything which is going around in the AI space and consumer AI space. So 6 months from now, what's the one signal that tells you that M is for real, M is here to stay?
Okay, so from business perspective, I guess I'll be focusing on their hiring system. Like if they are hiring to the ex Google's, Anthropics or OpenAI Indian talents, then this is something real ambitions, I can say. Okay, I'll also check will it launch the WhatsApp or the WhatsApp Plus app, because WhatsApp only is the cheapest and fastest platform. But if they will launch the WhatsApp with that native app, it will be a like hardest part and they'll take time.
Correct. So one thing that we also talked about was that their whole business mode is actually going to be the distribution, which is they are actually going to distribute their whole platform on top of WhatsApp. So it's a category play, right? For sure, interesting. That totally makes sense.
And from your side, what's the business signal you are looking for?
Yeah, so definitely we talked a lot about the numbers. So again, going back to my India one thesis, which means if we have to consider the total household count of the segment that is in the top layer, then I guess there are around 100 to 110 million homes, which means one home equals to one family, and they have multiple people in that. So the top decile is around 11 million household. If we break that down to like 10% conversion, and the realistically addressable wedge, for a paid AI concierge business model is around in 2016 is around 2 years. So if I'm successfully able to capture 10% of that wedge, then we are talking about at least 6,000 um, per annum per household. And if you break that down to the revenue angle, then we are talking about 660 crore in annual recurring revenue, and 5x at that revenue, they can multiply it to like 3,300 crores. Of course, these numbers are big, but we are just talking about the math in here. Uh, Going back to my angle we discussed, whether it's going to be subscription based or whether it's going to be commission based, it also like totally depends. So I'll also look for those type of signals, and of course the other partnerships that they do along the way and how it actually scales.
Yeah, sure. And I'm also thinking they'll maybe launch the freemium as well.
Yeah, exactly. This could be very pretty interesting play because everyone remembers Geo. They launched free SIM card for like 3 months, and then they pushed for the monetization, the top ups and everything, which was like a massive market penetration angle, right? Very interesting. Okay, so Rishi, we talked about everything about AM. So the bottom line is, are you bullish or bearish? From your side, what's the actual
Honestly, I want to be bullish here, and reason is here that every frontier labs are running towards that agentic system for individuals, and M is doing something different. They are building for a family unit, and they are organizing entire household, and not just for a single person's task, right? And that's a fundamentally different product I can consider. And the biggest picture, the biggest moat was the tools and integration part, where India has the second largest developer ecosystem in the world, right? The moment Indian APIs and integration standardize,
Yeah.
and UPI already proved that, right?
Yeah.
That's the real window to build something defensible to the on top. Okay. So yeah, I am bullish. Where Frontier Labs are building Jarvis for individuals, where M is building the operating system for a Indian family. So that's a bait, and I think it's a real one.
Correct. And I guess that's why a lot of Eastern centric products and startups and ecosystems are also trying to focus on Indian consumers, because first of all we have the biggest consumer market, and second is now we also have the talent pool that can actually deliver stuff so yeah, for sure I can definitely see your angle. So from my side, I guess I'll also be a bit more bullish. Of course, we don't know what's going to be the actual situation after 5 years. But I also like to quote Gary Vee here. So we talked about the thesis from Blume, like we have segment one, segment two, and segment three. So the whole, I guess, play in here is going to be the strategy that they use in order to distribute the product itself. So how they are going to scale, how they are going to actually go for maybe potentially Series A. So I would say I'm also like a bit bullish. Yeah.
That's our breakdown of M. Just two perspective.
We covered the business
And tech.
So we'll see you in the next breakout. It's going to be an exciting from here.
Until then, keep building.